My name is Chad Pitts. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Golf Association. And we're going to spend some time here talking about the rules of golf and specifically some of the major changes that went into effect this year in the rules. A quick overview on what we'll cover here tonight. A little bit on the publications. There's a few tweaks they've made to that. Short areas on etiquette in the areas of the course. We even talk a little bit more about promoting faster play in the new rules. And then we'll spend a lot of time on some of the relaxed requirements, reduced penalties, a lot on dropping. We'll talk about that for a while. Some free relief situations, some penalty relief situations. And then right at the end, we'll briefly hit on some advice and equipment issues. So first, the publications. You guys should have all gotten a couple publications when you walked in. There used to always be two books when it came to the rules. There was the regular Rules of Golf book, and then there was the Decisions book. We've added a third one in 2019, what they're calling the Players Edition. That book is the smaller book now, and this book does not include every single word that is included in the full Rules of Golf code. It's written in the second person, so instead of, when you read it, you're not going to see things like if the player hits it into a penalty area. It's going to say, if you hit it into a penalty area, these are what your options are. So in a lot of ways, it's written so it's a lot easier to read and understand, frankly. There's a lot of diagrams in here too, which is very helpful. And then you've got the full Rules of Golf book, which is this one. It's not super, not quite as thick as the third one we'll talk about. But this one includes every single word to every single rule, right? Sometimes in this small book, you're going to see at the end of the rule, in blue, it'll say for the full rule, go see the regular rule book, right? And then we have what used to be called the Decisions book, what we now call the Official Guide to the Rules. This includes, they don't call them decisions anymore, they call them interpretations. And so this is obviously a much thicker book, and then also at the end of it includes all of the motto local rule stuff that you might want to use for a championship. All right, etiquette stuff. We'll go through this pretty quickly. We all know in golf we act with integrity. It's one of the principles the game's built on. We're responsible as players for following the rules and knowing the rules and calling penalties on ourselves and applying those penalties, right? And being honest when it comes to all that stuff. We're asked in the game of golf to certainly show consideration to other players. That includes playing at a prompt pace, which the rules certainly focus more on beginning in 2019. It includes looking out for safety of others and not distracting others, certainly while they're trying to play. And then I know there's a superintendent in the room tonight, but definitely we want to take good care of the golf course. Replace our divots, smooth our bunkers, repair ball marks. We're going to talk about, when it comes to putting greens, a lot more stuff we're allowed to repair here in a little bit. So we can even do a lot more help in keeping good care of the course. We always talk about the areas of the golf course first, and this is important for one really big reason, and it's because when it comes to applying a rule in the game, one of the first questions we almost always ask is, where's your golf ball? Were you in a bunker? Were you on the green? What we're going to term the general area. It's important to know where your golf ball lie, because the relief situation or the penalty situation or whatever could be different depending on where you're at. So there's 5 areas of the golf course. The first really big one is called the general area. And the general area covers everything except the other 4 areas, right? It's a really easy definition. So let's talk about those other 4 areas first, and then we can kind of come back to the general area. So the 4 areas that are not part of the general area are the teeing area that you are playing from on the hole you're playing, okay? That doesn't mean the entire tee box. It doesn't mean the entire tee pad. It doesn't mean other teeing areas that happen to be on that hole. It's the teeing area that you're supposed to play from that's between those 2 tee markers and 2 club lengths in depth. That's your teeing area, as it's defined by the rules, certainly. So here's an illustration of, you've got, this is the teeing area as it's defined on the rules. It's not including anything else that would be a place where someone could tee off from. All bunkers are defined as an area of the course. Now that's not restricted to the hole you're playing. It's any bunker that's on the golf course. And then all penalty areas, and we'll talk more about penalty areas later, what we used to call water hazards. So anything that's marked red or yellow, penalty area, would be certainly an area of the golf course. And then the fourth area is the putting green of the hole you are playing. And so the teeing area and the putting green are specific to your given hole. Bunkers, penalty areas, that's just general throughout the course. And then everything else is the general area. So what did we not talk about as a specific area of the course? Fairway and rough, right? There's really no designation when it comes to the rules between fairway and rough, and that's why a lot of times when people think, hey, if you're taking relief from something, we get this question a lot. I'm in the rough, don't I have to stay in the rough? And the answer is no, not if, say it's a 1 club length relief situation. Not if that club length gets you in the fairway, as long as you're not going close to the hole. That's all part of the general area, and so the rules will tell you you just got to stay in the general area. All right, promoting faster play, pace of play. We actually have this in the book a lot more than it ever used to be, but certainly promoting pace of play is now instilled in the rules, and we'll talk about a few ways that they've kind of changed some rules to hopefully encourage for faster play.
It is important that you are aware of how your pace of play impacts others. The 2019 rules encourage prompt pace of play by all players, by recommending that you play promptly throughout the round, such as by preparing in advance for each stroke, moving at a good pace between strokes and between holes, and that you make a stroke in no more than 40 seconds.
So pretty interesting that we actually have a time in the rule now that says, hey, you should play a stroke in no more than 40 seconds. The rules also tell us that whenever we run tournaments as committees, we also have the ability to kind of establish our own pace of play guidelines. And so we might say, well, we don't want to do the 40-second rule. We just want to give you a specific time you have to finish 9 holes in. Or we want to give you a specific time you got to finish 18 holes in. So as the committee, we're able to sort of modify that. But if you don't do anything with a modification to that, it is at least in the rule now that says, hey, in general, you should be playing in at least 40 seconds or less. We also now encourage ready golf. And so in the old rules, if you read the rules, it would tell you to play in the order of who's away from the hole first. We've changed that. We kind of say, hey, you should still play in the order of who's away first, but if someone's ready to play, and you're not quite ready to play, have them go forward and play.
The order of play when starting a hole depends on who has the honor. After that, it is based on which ball is farthest from the hole. In stroke play, however, there is no penalty for playing out of turn, and the 2019 rules both allow and encourage you to play ready golf, which means to play in a safe and responsible order that is most convenient and that saves time. These players agreed to play out of turn because the player farther from the hole had a difficult shot, and the other player was ready to play.
And then another big one is that our search time is now reduced. We used to get 5 minutes to look for a golf ball. We now only get 3. That's a pretty big change. It's something to make note of. When does that 3 minutes start? Well, it starts when the player gets to where the ball's estimated to be and begins looking for it. If it's a situation where you're playing with caddies, it also starts when your caddy gets there and starts looking for it. Any coaches we have in the room, unless there's a specific rule that says it's going to start when the coach starts looking for it, it does not start when the coach starts looking for it. If you get there or out ahead of your player and you want to help them find the golf ball, under the USGA rules, it's certainly okay to start looking for that, and the clock will not stop. Another big one that we'll talk a little bit about later too is certainly, I think most of you know this, we're now allowed to putt with the flag stick in. And then we'll talk a lot about this later too, but there's now an optional local rule to deal with when you hit it out of bounds or lose a ball, and we'll hit on that later too. But it's definitely designed to speed up play. And then finally, we have a new scoring format actually added under the rules that's called max score. I know there's some high school meets, I think, that maybe play with a max score. That's actually in the rule book now, that you can do that as a format of play. What does that mean? I think most of you can figure this out if you didn't already know. You set whatever you want the max score to be, whether it's a number, 10, let's say, or you could go double par or something like that. And then as soon as a player reaches that number, they just go to the next hole, pick up their ball and go to the next hole. Here's an area where we'll spend a little bit more time. We're going to talk a lot about relaxed requirements and certainly some reduced penalty situations, what I think all of us really like, because a lot of things that used to be penalties are not penalties anymore. On the putting green, we're now allowed to repair a lot more things. We can repair spike marks, we can repair, scrapes or something that might be made by, whether it's a shoe or a club or a flag stick or something. Used to only be able to repair old hole plugs and ball marks, but now we can repair just about anything, like a deer track, animal hooves, we're allowed to repair that now. The things you can't repair is just like, you sometimes have uneven turf, right? Or just grass that isn't that good. You're not really allowed to repair that because you really can't repair that.
The 2019 rules allow you to repair almost any damage on the putting green. In addition to ball marks and old hole plugs, you are allowed to repair spike marks and any other damage caused by shoes, repair animal damage, and repair damage caused by maintenance practices. The fixing and repairing of the putting green must be done promptly and must not improve your line of play beyond the repair of the damage.
So, we're allowed to do a lot more on the putting green. We're also now allowed to touch the line of play. You guys probably watch a lot of golf, I'm guessing, and we probably all see on TV or just in general when we're watching other people play, those guys that walk like halfway between their ball and the hole and they kind of mimic a practice swing. And if you paid close attention, you probably noticed that they always made sure to hover their club above the ground because the old rules said you couldn't touch the ground when you're deciding kind of what your line of play is. That's gone. So it's okay to now touch the ground if you're, when you're trying to decide your line of play. You still can't leave a mark there while you make your stroke, purposely for something for you to aim at. You still can't do that. But there's no problem with touching the green now when you're determining your line of play.
Under the 2019 rules, when you are assessing the line for your putt, there will be no penalty if your caddy or partner touches the putting green to point out where you should aim or how your putt will break. This includes touching the green with the flag stick.
So that would have been a penalty last year for the caddy, touching the green in that instance when he's telling his player, hey, this is where I think you should aim. Notice he didn't leave the flag stick there for her to aim at when she actually made the stroke because he still can't do that. This is what we kind of call the Dustin Johnson rule from Oakmont a few years ago. It's the accidental movement of a ball on the putting green that Dustin ended up getting penalized for, and thankfully it did not cost him the US Open. But shortly after that, there was a local rule that we were allowed to put into play that basically said, look, if you accidentally cause your ball to move on a putting green, there's no penalty. Put the ball back and play on. Like I said, that was a local rule. Now what they've done beginning in 2019 is we just now have it right in the rules, so we don't have to worry about making sure that local rule's in play.
Under the 2019 rules, if you accidentally move your ball or ball marker on the putting green, there is no penalty. For example, if you accidentally move your ball in making a practice swing or in preparing for your stroke, drop your ball marker on your ball and move it. Move your ball with your foot. Or cause your ball marker to move. There is no penalty, and you simply replace your ball or ball marker on its original spot.
Something we've all probably really been playing with for a couple of years now because that local rule's been in effect, and we've kind of had that, I think, in effect in most of the tournaments we played. But now that it's right in the rule, we don't have to, as committees, certainly worry about making sure that that's on our rule sheet. This one, though, is a change, and I'll take a second to explain it. Well, first of all, what it says on the screen is simply, and this is on the putting green only, okay? After we lift and replace our ball, if our ball subsequently moves for any reason whatsoever, we're going to always replace it. Last year, if this would happen, we mark the ball, lift it, put it back, back away, the ball subsequently moves. As a rules official, our first question would be, what caused it to move? Did you cause it to move, or was it simply wind or gravity? And if the answer was wind or gravity, we would say, okay, play it from where it ended up. No longer. Because we've marked the ball already and replaced it, this new part of this rule just says, basically, once you mark it and replace it, that ball owns that spot. And no matter what happens to it, you're going to play it from there.
After you mark, lift, and then replace your ball on the putting green, if it moves for any reason, including through your own accidental actions or for some other reason such as wind. Always replace your ball back on its original spot. If you don't know the exact spot, estimate it as accurately as you can and replace the ball there.
So the other important part about that is I think a lot of times you're probably not going to know the exact spot, so just come as close as you can. I think we all know this by now, but it's worth repeating. Certainly no penalty if a putt strikes an unattended flagstick in the hole.
Under the 2019 rules, there is no penalty for hitting the flagstick that is in the hole when you've played your stroke from off the putting green or if you've played your stroke from on the green. So if you want to leave the flagstick in the hole, perhaps to save time or because you think it helps you, there is no penalty if your ball hits it. If your ball is not holed, play it as it lies.
That's a way that the new rules in theory are helping promote better pace of play. So with this, we're probably going to have a lot more people holing shots with the flagstick in. So what the ruling bodies did is they also added something to the definition of when a golf ball is holed that includes when it's resting against a flagstick in the hole. So hopefully you guys can see the picture here, but last year that golf ball would not be considered holed. You were allowed to go up and kind of move the flagstick, and if the ball fell in the hole, which I would certainly hope it would, then the ball was considered holed. But if you just walked up and grabbed that ball out of that position as is, last year you would not have considered to have holed out on that hole. This year it's a hole out. As long as any part of the ball is below the level of the ground and resting against the flagstick, that's considered to be holed. Here's a big one. In bunkers, something that we're going to now allow you to do is to move loose impediments.
Under the 2019 rules, there is no penalty for moving loose impediments when your ball is in a bunker. However, some bunker restrictions continue to exist.
So that's going to be okay. Probably a pretty big change, right? Now, like the gentleman in the video said, and we have another video coming up, there is definitely still some stuff we're not going to let you do in a bunker, including ground your club. There's some things that we've relaxed a little bit. You know, this gentleman's walked in, he brought the rake with him, he laid some clubs in there. That's okay. That was okay last year. A lot of people don't know that, but that would have been okay last year. What wouldn't have been okay last year is for him to kind of lean on his club like he is there. That would have been considered to be grounding the club. This year, it's okay. You can do that. If you're kind of waiting to play a shot and you maybe absent-mindedly kind of lean on your club like that, that's going to be fine. You're still not allowed to test the condition of the sand. You know, you can't really reach down there with your fingers or something and decide if it's wet or dry or how deep the sand is or anything like that. And you certainly can't ground your club. You can't hit the sand on your backswing. That sort of stuff is still, and you certainly can't take practice swings where you're hitting the sand. That stuff is still not allowed.
For example, you are still not allowed to touch the sand with your club, behind or in front of your ball, when making a practice swing, or when making your backswing.
So don't do any of those things, you'll still get penalized, but you can move loose impediments. That's good. We got rid of some penalties. If you make a stroke and your ball accidentally hits yourself or your equipment, it's no longer a penalty. In the past, it would have been one stroke penalty. The ruling bodies got together and said, has anybody ever done this on purpose to help them? And I think they determined that no, I can't believe that anybody ever has, so why is it a penalty? Let's get rid of it. And also that goes the same for double hitting a shot. Usually these are chip shots, but if you accidentally double hit or even triple hit a chip shot, there's not a penalty anymore. You simply count that as a single stroke, play the ball where it ends up and move on. This is accidental. So if some reason, somehow, somebody had the talent to double hit a shot on purpose, that would be a penalty. And then finally, this is probably the one that probably will come up maybe more than the other two. and that's if you accidentally move your ball while you're looking for it. That's not a penalty anymore. We reduced the search time you get to 3 minutes. So it's kind of nice that we also, in conjunction with that, got rid of the penalty that says, hey, if you move your ball while you're looking for it, that was a penalty last year, it's not going to be a penalty anymore. So maybe you can be a little more aggressive in that 3 minutes when you're trying to find your ball.
Under the 2019 rules, there is no penalty if you accidentally move your ball while searching for it. If you do, replace your ball back on its original spot. If you don't know the original spot exactly, like this player, simply estimate it, including how the ball was lying under the grass, and replace the ball there.
So it is important to note, like kind of what the young man did in the video, is you're required to replace the ball for one. If you don't know exactly where it was, just estimate where it was. But that includes also kind of where it was sitting up and down in the grass, right? Like you can't give yourself a perfect lie because you probably would have found the ball without accidentally moving it otherwise, right? So just be honest. And something else that's changed, which some of you may have known this, some of you may not have known that was like this before, but if the rules ever tell you you need to replace a ball, you're always going to place it now. In the past, you'd have to also ask, did you know the exact lie or not? And if you didn't know the exact lie, then the rules would say you would replace the ball by dropping it. Not anymore. Anytime the rules say you're going to replace it, you're always going to replace it. You're never going to drop it, even if you don't know the exact spot. You're just going to estimate the spot and place it, okay? We also got rid of some announcement requirements. When you'd come up on your ball and you weren't sure if it was yours, right? There's a procedure you had to follow. You could mark it, lift it, and the rules last year would have said you also have to announce that to your fellow competitors, what you're doing, why you're lifting your ball. They actually got rid of the announcement part of this procedure. So if you need to lift your ball to identify it, you can go ahead and do that without announcing it to your other people in your group. You still need to mark it, okay? And you still can only clean it up to the point you need to identify it, but you don't have that announcement provision anymore. Same goes for if you're checking to see if it's unfit for play. You don't have to announce that anymore. Go ahead and mark it, lift it, see if it's unfit for play. In that instance, if you determine that, yeah, it might be unfit for play, it's probably a good idea to show it to the other competitors at that point, but there's actually no requirement under the rules that you even do that. You can take it out of play. And then if you're determining, like say you're not quite sure if your ball's embedded, the rules will let you mark it and lift it to determine if it's embedded. If you're not quite sure if you're in an abnormal course condition, like maybe it's an animal hole or something that you're not quite sure of, you can mark and lift that. Or if you have interference from a movable obstruction, you don't have to announce that anymore. There is one big announcement that is still in there though, and that's when you need to play a provisional ball. But even that's been relaxed a little bit. It's still required though. So if you need to play a provisional ball, what we've changed is it used to say you need to announce that to your fellow competitors. Now we simply say you just have to announce that to anyone. So if the fellow competitors are 100 yards up already in the fairway, but there's a coach standing there, you can turn around to the coach and say, hey coach, I'm going to hit a provisional ball. We also even relaxed a little bit of what counts as the verbal declaration or the announcement. It's still not good enough to simply say I'm going to play another ball or I'm playing again. You should probably have the word provisional in there. But what they did relax a little bit is they added the second bullet point that just says, or you need to just clearly indicate what your intention is. So if you say something like, I'm going to hit another one just in case my first one is lost. Last year we would have said, well, you didn't say the word provisional, so that doesn't count. This year, we're clearly indicating the reason why we're hitting another one is because we think it might be lost. That's just as good. Makes a lot of sense, right? When you play a provisional ball, it's still really good practice, even though it's not required by the rule, for you to say, my first one was a Titleist 1 with a black dot, this one is a Titleist 2 with a green dot. That way, you're kind of easily, having people help you identify which is which. Okay, let's talk a little bit about dropping. Probably, along with the flag stick being left in, this is probably the most public change that people have been talking about. We have this term that we call simply dropping the right way. It's a quick way for us to say you dropped it from knee height now, used to be shoulder height, now we're at knee height. You dropped it straight down, you didn't throw it or spin it or otherwise put any influence on the ball. And then it also hit the ground first. It didn't hit your equipment or your foot or yourself before it struck the ground. And then depending on what you're dropping for, you're going to have a relief area. The ball's going to have to strike that relief area first. So it's a few different bullet points here, but basically we're saying drop it from knee height, don't put any influence on the ball, don't let it hit you before it hits the ground, and make sure it strikes in the relief area.
When dropping your ball under the new rules, the likelihood you will need only one drop will increase, while the randomness of your resulting lie will be preserved. The procedure is simple. Hold the ball at knee height, let go of it so it falls straight down, and make sure that it lands and comes to rest in the relief area. Don't throw, roll, or spin the ball, and don't let it hit you as it falls.
I saw this the other day, and I think it was a USGA video actually, but they were talking about the dropping stuff, and they were referencing how, you know, when we used to drop last year, we'd stand and you'd have to, you know, you'd have your arms straight out like this. And there were so many players who were thinking with this knee drop, that meant that you had to still stand like this and kind of bend over like this. Well, that's not true. You don't have to do that. A good way to do it is to kind of go like this, get out to where your eyes are really over the top of the ball, and you can really pinpoint where you're wanting to drop very easily if you use that as your technique. You know, I'm still dropping at knee height. There's nothing that says I have to stand in any certain position. As long as I'm at the right height, I'm good. And get down there and, you know, kind of really get on top of where you're going to drop it. It's going to make the accuracy of your drops good. Jack Nicklaus was famous, right, for practicing dropping. He's a pretty good player. When we talk about measuring club lengths, last year the rules would say you get to pick any club in your bag. This year the rules are going to say you're actually restricted to the longest club that's in your bag that's not your putter. So for most of us that's going to be your driver. But if we don't carry a driver, it's our 3-wood or whatever. It's the longest club that's not a putter.
You drop in relief areas defined by 1 or 2 club lengths. In the 2019 rules, a club length will always mean the length of the longest club in your bag, except your putter. For most players, that club will be their driver, but not always. This player is using his driver to measure his 2 club length lateral relief area, outside a red penalty area. This player's back on the line relief area is 1 club length on either side of and behind the point he has chosen on the line from the hole through where his ball was unplayable in the bunker. He is estimating the size of his relief area without measuring, then dropping well within 1 club length of that point. Finally, when a player measures with a shorter club, it is still the longest club in their bag except the putter that defines the relief area. Remember, when you drop, your ball must always land in, come to rest in, and be played from the relief area.
So a couple things there. It's always the longest club in your bag that's not your putter. There's nothing wrong with using a shorter club to kind of measure like the one gal did, but the distance she has is actually still whatever the longest club would have been. And then the one gentleman who has kind of taken it back on a line, he didn't actually use a club at all to measure, but there was no doubt that he was dropping within a club length, and that's totally fine too. So lots of times when you take relief from a cart path, you don't actually go through the process of measuring everything out. You know that you're well within your club length, and so you're fine. Whenever we drop a ball, there's kind of 2 big things we have to figure out. One is what's our reference point, and then 2 is what's our relief area. The reference point's the starting point for measuring our relief area, because if we get 1 club length or 2, we got to know what to measure from. And depending on what situation we're working under in the rules, the reference point's going to be a little bit different. So I'll talk about different reference points and examples of some. So, for instance, a reference point might be your nearest point or complete. Okay, if we're dealing with an abnormal ground condition, such as a cart path or ground under repair or something like that, we find the nearest point of relief and we measure a club length from there. Sometimes it's a penalty area, and if we hit it into a penalty area, then it's the last place that it crossed the margin of the penalty area. If we use the back on the line relief, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, for a couple different rules we could use this for, but when we go back on the line, we're actually going to be asked to choose a spot on that line as our reference point. and I'll talk more about this later. Or if we're required to go back to where we previously made the stroke from, then our reference point is where we previously made the stroke from. And something that's actually kind of new is embedded ball. Last year, if you had a ball that was embedded under the rules, the rule would tell you just simply drop as close as possible to where the ball was embedded. This year, we're actually going to say your reference point is the spot immediately behind where the ball embedded. So, in other words, not closer to the hole than where the ball embedded, but we're also going to give you a club length now to drop for an embedded ball, where it used to be dropped just as close as possible. And sometimes our reference point's the spot of the original ball. If you decide to declare a ball unplayable and you want to do the 2 club lengths option or back on a line option, your reference point is where that ball originally lay. We'll talk more about unplayable ball later too. How about measuring our relief area? So there's a bunch of different ways or different things that are going to tell us what our reference point is. Our relief areas are always going to be 1 club length except for 2 times. Okay? So this is really, for the most part, pretty simplified. So it's always going to be a 1 club length relief area, except for if you hit it into a red hazard, one of your options is 2 club lengths. I said hazard, I should say penalty area. Or if the one option under unplayable ball is to do 2 club lengths from where the original ball is. Those are the only 2 times you're going to have 2 club length relief areas. Everything else is going to be 1 club length. And then always, whenever we drop, the ball cannot be nearer the hole than whatever our reference point is. That's not a change, it's always been like that, but it's worth repeating. What's also not really a change is, how many times we drop before we place the ball. This is still the same, but what is a big change is last year we had 7 conditions that could happen when we would be required to redrop a ball. There's really only 1, and that's if the ball rolls outside of the relief area. Okay? So last year, basically the rules are going to say your ball has to strike in the relief area and it has to stay in there. So if the ball rolls outside of this relief area, we got to drop it again. So obviously that includes going closer to the hole because our relief area is defined as being not closer to the hole. So we would drop a second time, and then place where the ball struck the ground on the second drop. So that part of it's still really the same as what it was. But in a lot of ways, it's a lot easier to decide if you need to do, if you need to redrop.
In the 2019 rules, when dropping and taking free relief or penalty relief, your ball must be dropped in the defined relief area, and it must come to rest in there too. Most of the time, with the knee-height dropping procedure, that will happen on your first drop. When it doesn't, drop a second time. If that drop doesn't stay within the relief area either, place a ball where your second drop first touched the ground.
Like I said, dropping from a shorter height, knee height now instead of shoulder, means that the ball will more than likely stay kind of where it's dropped. But also, we don't have to deal with those 7 times we had to redrop. Basically, did we stay in the relief area or not? That's the question we ask. So those drops, drop, place, those are assuming we dropped the right way. Remember the slide a couple times ago when we talked about dropping the right way? But sometimes we don't drop the right way. What does that mean? It means, well, we didn't drop it from knee height. Maybe the ball hit us before it hit the ground. That's a wrong way drop. That doesn't count. Okay, that doesn't count in the 2 drops before we go drop, place. We would basically go drop. You got to do it the right way, otherwise it doesn't count at all. That's why it says that you can have an unlimited number of wrong way drops. Hopefully you figure it out after 1 or 2 to drop it the right way, otherwise we'd be here forever. And that doesn't help pace of play. Or the third way would be if you dropped it and it doesn't first strike the course in the prescribed relief area. So this lady in the picture dropped it and it hit just outside the relief area, so that just simply would not count at all. It wouldn't count in your drop place. You just start over at the beginning. Make sure you hit it in the relief area. This is a big change, but one that I think most people will really like, and that is any time that you're going to drop a ball now, you are allowed to substitute a new ball. You hit a cart path, you're going to take relief from a cart path. You might have a scuff on it. Last year you weren't allowed to substitute a new ball. This year you are. So anytime you're allowed to you're allowed to take a drop, whether that's free relief or penalty relief. You're also allowed to substitute a ball, which is
When the 2019 rules let you lift your ball to take relief instead of playing it as it lies, you will be allowed to either use your original ball or substitute and use a different ball. In the 2019 rules, you are allowed to substitute a ball when taking free relief, as well as when taking penalty relief. This player is substituting a ball when taking free relief from a cart path.
All right, let's talk a little bit about abnormal course conditions. Some of the things that are included as abnormal course conditions: ground under repair, movable obstructions, car passes are the big one there. Temporary water, we used to call that casual water, we call it temporary water now. Animal holes, there's a word missing from that used to be in there that's pretty important. It used to say burrowing animal holes. Now we don't really care if the animal is considered burrowing or not. A dog was never considered to be a burrowing animal under the rules. In 2019, if you encounter a hole that a dog made, you would get relief for that. So let's talk about taking relief from an abnormal course condition. First of all, this would be in the general area, right? So fairway rough, or first of all, what do we have to figure out? We have to figure out what's our reference point, how big of a relief area do we have, and then if there's any limits on kind of where we can go in the areas of the course, and we'll talk about that in a second. But for an abnormal course condition, our reference point's always our nearest point of complete relief, okay? That means we have to get our stance, lie of the ball, and area of intended swing. We have to have no interference from any of those things. By the way, when we're determining that, because we're taking relief from a ball that lies in the general area, our nearest point of relief also has to be in the general area. So if it's actually closer for us to go to a bunker, we can't do that because we have to stay in the general area. Our relief area size is always 1 club length, and we measure that from the nearest point that we determine. And then we can't go nearer the hole than the reference point, and like I said, we have to take complete relief, right? So you can't take relief for the lie of your ball that's sitting in ground under repair, but then you ultimately end up standing in the ground under repair. You would not have taken complete relief at that point, and you would get penalized for that. And when we do that, we have to stay in the general area. Okay, so we can't take relief into a bunker or into a penalty area. I don't know that you would really want to do that, but I don't know, maybe you're a great bunker player and that was something you'd want to do, but unfortunately you can't. When you're on the putting green, certainly still a free relief situation from an abnormal course condition. Probably the most likely one you'd run into on a golf course would be temporary water on a putting green. Although there is still sometimes where you have sprinkler heads and stuff that are on a putting green, and you would get relief if those things are affecting the lie of the ball, your stance, area of intended swing. But on a putting green, that also includes your line of play. So if you have it in your way on a putting green, you get relief for that. What's the procedure there? You would actually find your nearest point of complete relief, and we would place the ball directly on that spot. We don't do a club length when we're talking about a putting green relief situation. In theory, our nearest point could actually be off the green here. We would still place the ball, but maybe your nearest point would end up being on the fringe, for instance, or something, which could definitely happen. Embedded ball, we touched on this just a little bit ago, but this is actually something that they did put a little bit of a change to that doesn't really affect us over here in the United States. But last year, the rules of golf would say, if you just looked at the actual rule, it would say you got relief for an embedded ball in closely mown areas only. And then via local rule, we could also say, we're going to actually allow you relief for embedded ball anywhere through the green. That's what we called it last year, was through the green. We kind of reversed that default now and said, you actually just get relief for the embedded ball anywhere in the general area now. Minus a couple exceptions. They're small and rare, but it's by default anywhere in the general area now. Like I said, we used to call that through the green. On the putting green, if you've got an embedded ball, which definitely it does happen, it's a little different. Basically, we're telling you under the rules, go ahead and mark the ball, repair the ball mark, and put the ball back. Because we're allowed to repair ball marks on the green, right? If it doesn't stay, we just go to the nearest spot where it will stay that's no closer to the hole. You do not get relief for an embedded ball in a bunker or a penalty area. If your ball embeds in a bunker, it's a bad break, certainly. You can either play the ball as it lies or declare it unplayable. Those are kind of your options at that point. Penalty area, play the ball as it lies or take one of your penalty area relief options. So what's our reference point? We kind of already talked about this, but it is now the spot directly behind where the ball was embedded, where we used to say, just drop it as close as possible to where the ball embedded. We're now saying, actually, your reference point is right behind where the ball embedded. And now you get a club length of relief. Where we used to not give you the club length, we now get a club length relief, which is nice because if the ball embedded, it's probably in a pretty soggy spot, and hopefully a club length will get us to maybe somewhat of a drier position. If we're taking relief for the embedded ball, like I said, in the general area, we have to stay in the general area and we can't go closer to the hole. Cool. Let's talk about ball lost or out of bounds. And we're going to talk a little bit about that local rule I mentioned earlier. Before we get to that, I just want to stress that the out of bounds rule really didn't change under the rules of golf. It's still stroke and distance. You still you still count the stroke you made, and then add a penalty stroke and go back to where you last played from. If you played from the teeing area, the rules are going to tell you actually can play from anywhere in the teeing area, including being able to tee the ball up. If we played from the general area, a bunker, or a penalty area, we just go back to where we last played from, and we actually get a club length of relief now. We used to have to go back right to the spot and play from as close as possible to where we last played from. Now we find the spot and we get a club length no closer to the hole to play from. On a putting green, you just simply place the ball right back on a putting green. Well, why, how often have you putted a ball and then lost it or it went out of bounds? I don't know. So let's talk about this local rule. We bring this up and we really want to stress that this is a local rule, okay? It's not intended to be used at all for tournament play. It's more of a, hey, you're out playing with your buddies every day. We never go back to the tee if we end up losing our ball, so we'd always just throw one down anyway. Now we kind of have this local rule that sort of covers that, so you can kind of do it under the rules. The gist of it is, like I said, you don't have to go back to where the spot you last played from was. You're going to add 2 penalty strokes. In a lot of cases, your drop area that you're going to have to choose from is going to be really, really big. This is a local rule, local rule, local rule. It is not a rule of golf unless it is in effect for the event you're playing in. So do not do this unless you're sure, if you're playing in a tournament, unless you're sure that this rule is in effect. I would guess more often than not it is not in effect. But that's why we bring it up, because so many people thought this was just part of the new rules. So what do? This is for a ball that's lost or out of bounds. If we're talking about a ball that's lost, we estimate where we think the ball's lost. We actually get to go 2 club lengths to one side of that, and then I'm going to have a video that's going to show this, so don't worry if you're not following me. We're going to go 2 club lengths to one side of where the ball is estimated to be lost. We're going to go 2 club lengths into the fairway that's equidistant from that spot, and then anywhere between those 2 spots all the way back you're going to have to drop it. If we're talking about a ball that's hit out of bounds, we just use where it crossed the out of bounds as our reference point, come 2 club lengths into the fairway that's equidistant from where it went out of bounds, and we can drop anywhere behind those 2 areas.
Starting in 2019, when your ball is lost or out of bounds, your course can use a local rule that does not require you to play under stroke and distance. Here is how it works. For 2 penalty strokes, estimate where you think your original ball is and how far from the hole that is. Imagine a straight line running from the hole through a point 2 club lengths wide of where you estimate your ball is. Next, at the same distance from the hole, estimate the point on the nearest edge of the fairway, and measure or estimate a point 2 club lengths into the fairway. Then, imagine a straight line running from the hole through that point in the fairway. The relief area where you can drop and play from will be quite large, anywhere between the 2 lines, and the distance from the hole your original ball is estimated to be, or farther. You cannot use this local rule if your ball is lost in a penalty area, or if you have played a provisional ball.
So one key thing there that he mentioned right at the end is if you did play a provisional ball, if this local rule is in effect and you did play a provisional ball, you're required to proceed with your provisional ball. You cannot then invoke this local rule. In other words, you don't get a choice of whether to pick your provisional or do something else. So if this is in effect, unless you hit a terrible shot, I would think, and your reference point is really, really bad, like way away from the hole, I would probably not hit a provisional ball, because by definition, you're guaranteed to get back in the fairway if that's what you want. There's a couple of examples here too, if you couldn't quite tell in the video. So here's the idea. If we think we lost the ball in the trees or in the bushes over here, we get to go 2 club lengths to this side. We find equidistant in the fairway, go 2 club lengths there, and then we can drop anywhere, you know, in this big shaded area. If that's our tee shot, we've hit 1 off the tee, we get 2 penalty strokes, 2, 3. We're going to be hitting our 4th shot. So it's like we went back to the tee and played and got it back into play. So here's out of bounds. If we hit it out of bounds to the right, we just use where it crossed the out of bounds as our reference point, and again come 2 club lengths into the fairway, and that big shaded area is where we could drop from. All right, so that was out of bounds, lost ball. Let's talk about penalty areas. And first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what they are, because we're now allowed to mark a lot more stuff penalty areas. The general rule of thumb is, if you think, well, certainly what we used to call water hazards, all of that stuff should still be marked as penalty areas. But we could also include things or areas where a ball is most likely to be lost, or it's really, really difficult to play from there. We could term those penalty areas now.
In the 2019 rules, areas with red or yellow markings, most golfers call water hazards, have a new name: penalty areas. Penalty areas can also include other places on the course not containing water, where balls are frequently not found or not playable, such as densely wooded areas, deserts, canyons, and more. If you lose your ball in a penalty area, or find it and decide not to play it, you have several options to take relief outside it for 1 penalty stroke.
If you find your ball in a penalty area and want to play it from there, the same rules apply as when playing a ball from the fairway or the rough. So before making a stroke, you are allowed to move loose impediments, make practice swings that touch the ground or any water inside the penalty area, and ground your club near your ball.
It'll probably seem weird the first few times you do it, but you'll get used to it. It's really no different than playing a shot from the fairway. So we still have to be careful when we move loose impediments that we don't move our golf ball. And that's no different than if you're in the fairway or anywhere else, you know, other than a putting green. But at least you can move them now. So big difference here. Remember, bunkers, we can move loose impediments, but we can't ground our club. Red and yellow penalty areas, we can move loose impediments and ground our club. One thing that maybe was a little bit of a misconception, at least when the first proposed set of these new rules came out, is a lot of people, and this is rightfully so because they kind of said that yellow penalty areas were going to go away, but ultimately they didn't. So we've still got the ability to mark things red or yellow, and our relief options change only slightly between the two, and so we'll cover those. All right, so let's talk about some relief options. When you find your ball in a penalty area, or when you know or are virtually certain that your ball's in a penalty area, and this is important because sometimes you hit a shot and you don't ultimately see the ball land, but you get up there, you come over a hill, whatever, and you might determine that, look, there is nowhere for my ball to be other than in this red penalty. In the rules, they've even added known or virtually certain means 95% of the time. So you need to be 95% sure or more that that's where your ball's at. Otherwise, you'd have to treat it as lost, in which case you'd have to do stroke and distance. But as long as you found your ball, or you've got that knowledge that, hey, there's nowhere for it to be other than this red penalty area or this yellow penalty area, then you can proceed with these options. So let's talk about the first two. Stroke and distance relief, go back to where you last played from. If that means you played from the teeing area, you can play from anywhere in the teeing area. If it means you played from the general area, you can go to that spot, do a club length, and play from there. You can do what's called back on the line relief. That means we take the spot where the ball last crossed the penalty area, keep that in line with the hole, we can go back as far as we want. On that line, we pick a spot. And that spot that we pick becomes our reference point for measuring a 1 club length area in which we can now drop. And then this option, which is only available for red. So you do not get this option with yellow. And that is the 2 club length lateral relief, they call it. So you take where the ball crossed, you can do 2 club lengths, no closer to the hole. There was an option last year that said you could, so if this thing last crossed the red water hazard, because it was last year, at 150 yards, you could find 150 yards on the opposite side and you could drop within 2 club lengths of that. They got rid of that option. You don't have that option anymore. You can add that option back via local rule if you have to, if you know it's necessary for the makeup of your hazard or your, should say penalty area, I guess. So you can add it back via local rule, but that option is not there unless it's there via local rule. So we've got stroke and distance available for red or yellow. Go back to where we last played from. Now, the chances of putting a ball into a penalty area are a little more likely than putting it out of bounds or losing it. Back on a line relief is available for red or yellow. Now, how do we do that back on a line? Let's talk a little bit about that real quick. We take where the ball last crossed the penalty area, we keep that in line with the hole, we go back as far as we want. No limit to how far back we can go. We can go as far back as we want to go there.
When taking relief from a penalty area for one penalty stroke, one of your relief options in the 2019 rules is going back on the line. Follow these steps. Estimate the point on the edge of the penalty area where your ball last crossed as it went in. Imagine a straight line running from the hole through that estimated point and extending behind the penalty area. Go back as far as you like and identify a spot on that line. Measure or estimate a 1 club length wide relief area on either side of and behind that spot. In the 2019 rules, a club length is always the longest club in your bag except your putter. Then drop a ball in the relief area. Your dropped ball must land in and be played from the relief area.
Okay, what's new there, we always had this option, but last year the rule would tell us we had to drop it right on the line. What's new there is we're going to give you now a 1 club length, on either side, no closer to the hole, relief area. So to come up with that, we need a reference point for measuring the 1 club length, which means you as a player now kind of have to pick a spot on that line to use as your reference point. You should do that physically. Notice it says should. You don't have to. You should put a tee down or a coin or something to somewhat mark what your spot is you're picking as your reference point. If you don't, either mentally or physically, you can mentally pick the spot. Actually, you could kind of look down and say to yourself, okay, that's my spot right there, and picture it in your head, or maybe you're using some imperfection in the ground to help you decide your spot. That's okay. It's not recommended, but that's actually okay. But if for some reason you didn't even think about what your spot is, you just absentmindedly dropped it, we're actually going to create that spot for you under the rules. And what's going to happen is, wherever you drop that, at the spot it strikes the ground, equidistant from the hole, is going to be your reference point. And here's kind of an example of that. It's the point on the line, the same distance from the hole where the drop ball hits the ground. So we drop it, that falls at 150 from the hole. 150 from the hole right on that line is going to be our reference point. Why do we need to know that? Because we need to know, did that ball stay within 1 club length of that reference point? And also, did it not go closer to the hole than the reference point? Because it's not allowed to do that either. It's kind of weird because it's different than, last year, because you didn't have to deal with reference points, you were just dropping on the ground. Your only point was like where it last crossed. So people would drop a ball, it bounced forward, a club length. That's actually fine because you never got closer than where the ball last crossed. But now we have this reference point that we're dealing with to decide if you got closer. So when we're dealing with penalty area relief and we're dealing with back on the line, it's going to be a little different than taking relief for an abnormal ground condition. When we were talking about that, I talked about how you had to stay in the general area, right? With penalty areas, you don't actually have to stay in the general area. Basically, you can drop in any area of the golf course other than the same penalty area you're taking relief from. So if this back on the line means that you can drop in a bunker and for some reason you want to drop in that bunker, go right ahead. If this back on the line relief means there's another penalty area that's different and you want to drop in there, go ahead. Pretty rare. I don't know that people would do that, but if you wanted to, you could.
In the 2019 rules, when you take lateral relief from a red penalty area under a 1-stroke penalty, Estimate the point on the edge of the penalty area where your ball last crossed as it went in. Starting at that point, measure or estimate your 2 club lengths relief area outside the penalty area that is not nearer the hole. In the 2019 rules, club lengths are the length of the longest club in your bag, except your putter, and then drop a ball in that area. Your drop ball must land in and come to rest in the relief area.
So you get 2 club lengths for red only, you don't get that with yellow. And then your reference point in that case is where the ball last crossed the red penalty area. And same thing, if you're doing 2 club lengths for red, you can go into a bunker if that's what you want to do and that's within your 2 club lengths. Feel free to switch the area of the course you're in, because you're not really in an area of the course. You're taking relief from a penalty area, which is where your ball was. And then, like I said, there is no more what we call opposite margin relief. We talked about this already, but we can add it back via local rule. Let's talk about unplayable ball. You can take unplayable ball relief anywhere on the golf course except for penalty areas. We require that you proceed under the penalty area rule if you're in the penalty area. And there's 3 options you have for unplayable ball relief. All of them carry a 1-stroke penalty. The first one is stroke and distance. We've seen this a few times, but we can go back to where we last played from. Drop within a club length of that. And we can do that stroke and distance one even if we have not found the ball. We don't have to find the ball to proceed under stroke and distance. But if we're going to do one of the other 2, which is taking where the ball originally lay, go back on the line, so very similar to the penalty area relief one. The difference is here we don't have a margin that we crossed, so our reference point's where the ball originally lay. And then the third option is the 2 club lengths from where the ball originally lay. We have to find the ball in these other 2 options for one big obvious reason. That's our reference point, where the ball lay. So if we just see a ball sitting in a bush, we can't declare that unplayable unless we're going to do stroke and distance, because then we're not required to identify it. But if we're going to use 2 or 3 here, we obviously need to make sure that's our ball, because that's our reference point for measuring. So we already talked about a lot of this stuff, but stroke and distance, go back. If you play from the tee, you can play from anywhere in the tee. If you're using the back on the line, you get to pick any spot. That's your reference point, and then you get a 1 club length area to drop in. So this is all stuff we just covered with the penalty area stuff, and it just remains the same with unplayable ball, including that if we don't pick it, the spot becomes where it hits the ground when we drop, equidistant from the hole. Our 1 club length relief area on this second one, and again, it can be in any area of the golf course. If for some reason we want to go back on the line and drop in a bunker, if we're a ball lie in the general area, we could move into a bunker if we wanted to in this case. Same thing with lateral, 2 club lengths. We're in the general area. If we want to move to a bunker or a penalty area or something, we can go to any part of the golf course. But if our ball originally lay in a bunker, we actually need to stay in the bunker with the second and third options. The first option is our stroke and distance, right? If our stroke came from outside the bunker, we can go back to where we last played from, and we don't have to stay in the bunker. If we declare the ball unplayable in a bunker and we want to do back on the line relief, for 1-stroke penalty, we have to stay in the bunker. We're going to talk about a new option they have now that's going to have 2 strokes that you'll be able to get out of the bunker. But if we do back on the line and we only want the 1-stroke penalty, we do have to stay in the bunker. And same thing with the 2 club lengths. We have to remain in the bunker if we're going to declare the ball unplayable. The new option that we have, the 4th option, is that if we want to declare the ball unplayable in a bunker, and we're a terrible bunker player, we can take 2 penalty strokes and come all the way outside using the back on the line relief.
When you decide your ball in a bunker is unplayable, under the 2019 rules, you have an extra option that lets you drop back on the line outside the bunker for a penalty of 2 strokes. Imagine a straight line running from the hole through where your unplayable ball is. Identify a spot on that line as far behind the bunker as you like. Measure or estimate a 1 club length wide relief area on either side of and behind that spot. Then drop a ball in that area. Your dropped ball must land in and be played from the relief area.
So just to kind of recap the unplayable ball stuff. If our ball lies in the general area and we want to declare it unplayable, we can kind of go to any other part of the course when we're doing the dropping. If our ball originally lies in the bunker though and we want to declare it unplayable, the 2 club lengths option and the back on the line option, we have to stay in the bunker if we only want 1 penalty stroke. We can pay an extra penalty stroke and come all the way out of the bunker using the back on the line, which is a new one this year. Advice and help, real quick. I know a lot of you don't play with caddies, but a lot of you do. This one's gotten a lot of pub, especially on the tour lately. But they have definitely instituted a restriction on the caddy standing behind the player. The ruling bodies kind of came together and said, you know, we feel like one of the fundamental skills of the game is actually lining yourself up for a shot. So we're going to limit the help you can get in lining yourself up, meaning your caddy can no longer, you know, stand behind you, line you up, the way that really we were seeing it done on the LPGA Tour more than anywhere else.
The rules permit you to freely exchange advice with your caddy or partner, but you're required to act alone when making a stroke. Under the 2019 rules, once you start taking your stance for a stroke, neither your caddy nor partner are allowed to stand behind you.
So that includes your caddy. It also includes your partner, though. If you guys are doing any, you know, 4-ball or foursome type stuff, don't have your partner standing back there when you're lining up. And then this is something that we used to allow, or would always have to allow via local rule, but it's now just part of the rules of golf, kind of like the embedded ball or the Dustin Johnson rule. Distance measuring devices, as long as they don't measure slope or wind or any of that other stuff, are now permitted unless you write a local rule that says they can't use them. So PGA Tour, they put a local rule in that says you can't use rangefinders, which is why they still don't use them. But the rules of golf are going to always allow you to do this. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate your attention tonight.